us today.
Thanks for having me on the show.
So we're glad you were here. There was a lot going on. So first off, um, we always like to help ground people in in with the guests and also the work. So you're tell everybody, remind everybody, like you've been on WBOK a lot, you've been on this show a lot, but remind
Sure,
everybody who you are because we might have some first time listeners tuning in. And we always have
sure.
guests online who are actually not from New Orleans. So tell everybody who Representative Matt Willard is.
Well, I appreciate that opportunity. My name is Matthew Willard. I'm state representative for District 97 here in the city of New Orleans. My district covers Gentilly, all of Gentilly, areas around Bayou St. John, and I have a couple of precincts in the east off of Dowman Road. I've been in the legislature since 2020. I was elected in 2019 when we reelected John Bell Edwards to the governor's mansion. And then starting in 2023, I became the chairperson for the House Democratic Caucus. So I've been the minority leader in the House for the last couple of years, which has been a very interesting role as well. In the legislature, I serve on the Ways and Means Committee, which handles tax policies and the construction budget for the state. I serve on insurance, which we've
Hmm.
certainly done a lot of work together on
That's
that
right.
committee,
Yep.
and I also serve on the local municipal committee.
So yeah, you were part of. We talked about this last year in the wrap up. We had that 11th hour intercession, as if you will, for the Catholics in the room. That 11-hour intercession where you were able to get a deal wrought last year that we were actually able to get direct relief for homeowners and policyholders who have policies through Louisiana Citizens. Below
Yes.
below I-10, the 10% surcharge was eliminated, and for people
Yep.
above I-10, that surcharge was cut in half. So we did manage to eke out last year some direct relief for insurance. Spoiler alert, everybody knows we did that this time, but we I want to also
Yeah.
talk about I want to actually help everybody kind of understand the the viewpoint, right? The environment that you guys were working in. And so you mentioned the fact that you're the minority leader. And so that means that, and also let's break down for folks the numbers.
Yeah.
With that 2023 election when Governor Landry won in that crowded field, and he won a narrow majority, but he still won. He got to 50 plus
Yeah.
one. We also voted in a supermajority of Republicans, right?
Yeah, in both chambers. So currently, the makeup in the House, there's 32 Democrats, there's 73 Republicans, 105 total membership. To have a supermajority, you need 70 members. So the Republican delegation has a supermajority with a 3 vote margin, which obviously makes it very difficult. But you went back to the 2023 election cycle, and if you recall, Governor Landry won without a runoff, which
Right.
really hurt us
Right.
in our attempts to flip some seats.
That's right.
I was the vice chair of our caucus during that election cycle, but our chairperson was running for the state senate. I didn't have opposition, so I was leading our election campaign strategy, and we had identified a few seats that we thought were flippable.
Right.
Just to let everybody know, it's very tight. And even the flippable seats that we identified, changing those from Republican to Democrat, are still long shots and require a lot of groundwork, and they require a lot of money. But we made it possible. We had enough people in runoffs to stop a supermajority in the House at least. But the fact that we did not have a gubernatorial runoff really worked against us, and so we actually lost the seats that we were playing for.
Hmm.
And so the makeup is what it is. The Senate also has a super majority, so my hope was that in the legislature, Democrats could stick together on big ticket issues and work with some of the moderate Republicans to get some things done, some big ticket initiatives done. And it has really proved more challenging than I thought it would be. And what I mean by that is, depending on the issue, I'll lose Democratic support on certain issues
Hmm.
and pick up some Republican support to where, it still passes by a narrow margin. I can think of there were two or three big bills that came to the House during the last week of session, which narrowly passed. One is a constitutional amendment that will be on the ballot next year that would essentially gut civil service in the state of Louisiana. So
Right.
that's something that we're going to have to rally around.
Right. That's right.
Yep. And then another one was a constitutional amendment dealing with the school district in St. George, outside of Baton Rouge. And if the listeners are not familiar, St. George is a newly created municipality in East Baton Rouge Parish, which split off from Baton Rouge, the city of Baton Rouge. And so, the Baton Rouge delegation, the members from the Baton Rouge delegation in my caucus were opposed to this effort, this constitutional amendment, and that one also passed, I think, with 70 votes. But that has to go to the voters statewide as well. So it's tough. And look, you pay attention, you follow the legislature closely, Andronika. It's tough, and it's even more so frustrating when you think you have a pathway to either pass or kill something, and then find out we can't stick together. So,
Right.
The plan can't move forward.
That's right. And so this is this is the piece that I'm glad for you. I'm grateful for you highlighting one, because I want to dig in on those bills and talk to talk about this and talk about the what's happening in the session and
Hmm.
the real world consequences, right? I think a lot of sometimes our elected officials act this way, but I think a lot of community is often disconnected from what's going on. And it's one of the
Yeah.
reasons why we enjoy talking to you legislators, having you all on, as well as our advocacy partners to bridge the gap so that you can understand the reality on the floor, right? The reality in the Capitol building, which is, it is a different space to be
Chaos.
in, and how that translates into the real world. So you
Yeah.
guys came into this session for the second year in a row in an extreme minority, but with some real clear and also I think some wind at your sails, right? I mean,
Yeah.
one of the
We
things
defeated
that
the amendments earlier this
that's
year.
that's right, that's right. You that was one of the things, and again, also last session wasn't as terrible as it could have been, although there were some really bad things. I think by the end, y'all had several marathon sessions last year. Y'all gavelled
Oh,
in
yeah.
with the first special session, MLK Day, right?
Yep.
Bit of
Yep.
irony there. That criminal justice session that was also actually terrible, ending good time and parole basically in Louisiana, and a couple of other bad things, and then rolling into that other special session, and then the full session, and
Yep.
but one, we talked about the victory you got on insurance last year. There's also because that's the big thing, is like killing bad bills is not easy, but it's simpler than getting good things passed. And
Absolutely.
you got to do both. But we also saw the Constitutional Convention, Governor Landry's attempt to wholly rewrite the Constitution go down in flames in last year's
Yep.
session. And then
Yep.
he calling the Landry's decision to come back at that with that special session in December, those constitutional amendments. And as you mentioned, then and that was one area that session was particularly gnarly, right? There was just a lot of distractions. There's other bad things that passed, and everything. Then we got those 4 constitutional amendments that the people overwhelmingly rejected.
Hmm.
So talk us through coming into that session, understanding that the people didn't want this, and then seeing this redo of all of these bills coming back, and y'all having to play whack-a-mole again with them.
So last year we were in session for about 7 months, Andronika. So
Wow, I didn't even make that math.
yeah, I think a little bit more than half of the year we were in session last year. So it was tough. Obviously, the special session that I think was in November dealing with taxes was really grueling for me because I'm on Ways and Means, and I'm also the chairperson for the House Democratic Caucus.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a lot of work fighting against the really bad proposals, and then working with legislative leadership to improve some of the proposals that could be better. And then to roll from that and to go into the regular session this year, which thankfully was only 2 months, was tough because
Right.
I still felt like I hadn't, most of the membership actually, like we hadn't recovered from the barrage of sessions we had last year. But I think the way that leadership approached the defeat of those constitutional amendments was that the people of Louisiana wanted more specificity. They
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to have everything jammed up in one constitutional amendment. They broke things out into particular sessions, so into particular bills. So some of the constitutional amendments that the people are going to be voting on as a result of this session. One deals with inventory taxes. Inventory tax is something that businesses pay basically on their goods that they're holding, right? So they pay that tax to local governments. So it's a source of revenue for local governments. But
Right.
then the state jumps in and issues a tax credit to the businesses for the tax money. It's not dollar for dollar, but it's a good chunk of what they pay in that tax to local government. So the governor really wants to do away with that tax credit. More so, he wants to do away with that tax altogether, but it's
Right.
a source of revenue for locals. So there'll be a constitutional amendment dealing with that, and basically a program that would pay local governments who decide to either eliminate that inventory tax or to phase out that inventory tax. There's another constitutional amendment that will appear on the ballot that deals with making sure that our public school teachers actually get a true pay raise. For the
Mm-hmm.
last 3 years, our teachers and support staff have received one-time stipends. And what that means is every time we go into session, we have to fight and use some of our political capital to make sure that our public school teachers and support staff continue receiving that stipend.
Right.
It was one of our big priorities this session because we were worried, since those constitutional amendments failed, that they would retaliate against the teachers and not give them that stipend,
That's
which
right.
would mean that teachers this school year would walk away with less money in their pocket.
They get a
And
pay cut. Right. It
they
wasn't
they would get a pay cut.
because
And
and that was
so
one of the issues with Amendment 2 was that it wasn't really a pay raise. It was making permanent the stipend, right? And with some bizarre financial schemes. Um,
yeah. So I mean that's still part of it, but I was happy that when we went into session, leadership in the House and leadership in the Senate was really behind making sure that the teacher stipend was still funded, and
that's
so
right.
we were able to secure that for this session. But there will be a constitutional
That's
amendment.
right.
It specifically deals with the teacher pay raise issue. And I know it's like a roundabout scheme, and for everybody,
And I'm talking about the old
at
one.
least
Yeah, the new constitutional amendment is actually a better strategy. We
It,
don't.
it's a better strategy for sure. I know people would still prefer to have it, directly calculated into the MFP,
Right.
but this would guarantee teachers a pay raise, and we included language to make sure that it would apply to all public school teachers and support staff, even for charter schools, which was a
Okay.
big concern that we had in the city of New Orleans.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so the teacher unions, they support it. So, I mean, obviously we'll have a lot more talk as we get closer to that election cycle, but I think, if I'm being completely honest, I think this is going to be the best chance that we have to make sure that the teachers do get an actual pay raise and not like a one-time stipend deal. And so it'll be interesting to see once we get closer to the election how that starts to play out with public sentiment.
And so yeah, also too that it's interesting that the election is on these constitutional amendments is not going to be until April of next year. So I think you were in the legislature when there became a desire to not have all of these elections with these constitutional amendments on them. And despite that, that's how we ended up with March 29th. But typically, right,
Yeah.
They
For
want
sure.
you want to see the constitutional amendments on an election cycle in a time when people are used to going out to vote, and they can learn about it, right? So that's
So
part.
that
Yeah,
April date was selected because that's when you'll have the primary elections for Congress and the U.S. Senate. So
right,
that's why they pushed it on that date. And you'll have hotly contested primaries. So,
right.
it was either. So there's two things that I want to note on the election date for constitutional amendments, Andronika. The first thing is it has to occur during a statewide election.
Hmm.
So although this fall
And that's a
we have
change, right? That
local.
was a rule that was made, or because you.
No, 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 because constitutional amendments have to be approved by voters statewide.
Right.
So this fall, although we have local elections, right? We have mayor, city council, clerks of court. We have municipal elections this fall. Other parishes are going to have municipal elections this fall, but there's no statewide election this fall, meaning there's nothing that will appear on the ballot that every eligible voter in Louisiana can vote for.
Right. But
That the next statewide election is scheduled for fall of 2026. However, since we moved to this closed primary system, you're going to have a statewide election occur next April, and so that's why they put those on the April ballot. I guess they wanted to put it out there before we go into session next year,
hmm
because they could have put it on the fall ballot in 26, but they chose to do it in the spring ballot of 26.
right. But
But
there's nothing on
you can
March 29th. I'm going back to this year. We didn't have any. There was nothing else
so
except.
that was the second point I was about to make. So you can also create a bill to call for a statewide election.
Gotcha.
So it either has to appear on a regularly scheduled statewide election ballot, or a legislator can run a bill to create a statewide election for a certain date. And so that's what they did for the March election. And that is why we had a statewide vote in March of this year.
Gotcha. So yeah, so
Yep.
that was they did that in the special session,
Correct.
to
Correct.
make sure that put all of those pieces together, so that, and again, to your point, there was a desire to have some of these fiscal matters settled before this session.
Before session. Yep.
And they did get settled. The
Exactly.
voters said no, and y'all managed to figure it out and keep.
Yep.
And I appreciate you making the point that it was generally that the teachers were not used as political fodder and political football. And that
Yeah,
you
that
did.
was very important to us.
Yeah, because again, folks did want teachers to get those raises, but a lot of people, including a lot of teachers, said that the amendments on March 29th weren't the way to do that. They wanted to see something else, and so this is one of the instances where the citizens' voices were heard
Yep.
and heeded. And you also made another really great point that one of the things overwhelmingly that led to the defeat of the constitutional amendments on March 29th was the fact that voters said, this is too confusing. This stuff is all glopped together. Break them up. And y'all did that too, right?
Yes, absolutely. There was just too much going on in those amendments. Every time I presented on amendment number 2, I believe it was,
Hmm.
I brought up something new because there was so much in that constitutional amendment. And if I can't explain it all to you under 10 minutes, then we're trying to do too much as a state. And so I think people noticed that. People shared their frustration,
Hmm.
and instead of trying to explain and rationalize, there was a ground movement to organize an effort to vote no against all of those constitutional amendments, and they failed.
Say no to them all, y'all. That's
Yep.
right. And but you guys broke them up as a body, right? And I know that you were on different sides of different things. Like, there's good news. There's a constitutional amendment that actually addresses teacher pay raises in a real way. So check that box.
Yeah.
But there's the inventory tax piece. So breaking that up, but then there's also some things that aren't necessarily quite as good, that came out of this session, and some of them are going to be things that the voters get a chance to go back to, right,
For sure.
and say the
Uh,
final word.
Yeah, the big one for me was the civil service bill. I believe that was Senate Bill 8. Um, that one would allow the legislature to go in and basically determine that classified civil service positions are no longer classified. So it would give the legislature the authority to say that these positions are unclassified moving forward. There's a retroactive component to it, and for me, it's very dangerous. When I was talking to the people involved with that legislation, I said, "Look, I think this will be a long shot to pass at the ballot box. I think if you really want to try to do something here, you need to be more targeted. What
Hmm.
positions are we talking about? What agencies are we talking about here?" But instead, it's sort of a blank check for the legislature to go in and really target civil service. And I'm opposed to that. I tried to defeat it on the House floor. It passed with 70 votes.
Oh,
So
wow. Yeah.
it passed with the exact number of votes that it needed to pass. And just for the record, last year we were able to defeat that bill. It was similar, not exactly the same, but it was similar. We defeated that bill twice on the House floor. We defeated it once, and then they brought it up a second time to try to get the votes, and we defeated it the second time. And unfortunately, it did pass this session.
Wow. And that's something that we've got to be on the lookout for. I mean, one, I know that Governor Landry has created his own version of Doge, something that's landed like a lead balloon, I think, not just for the people in this country, but particularly for the people in Louisiana, many of whom rely on things like Medicaid and Social Security and SNAP and a lot of resources, a lot of government assistance that we contribute to, and getting back in FEMA. Um, and
Yep,
no
yep.
no one wants to see these things go away. And
Job Corps.
Job
I
Corps,
mean,
oh my God,
there's so much.
there's
Coastal protection and restoration. I mean, there's EPA. I mean,
that's right.
look, I think a lot of voters are realizing that the president bit off more than he can chew here.
Hmm.
A lot of people who thought that they would be safe, that their states would be safe, that their constituents would be safe, are now scratching their heads saying, wow. And the reason for that is because if Congress really wants to save money and start to rein in the federal deficit, they have to go after programs which, people are going to protest over. They have to
Right,
go after Social Security, and they have to go after Medicaid, and they have to go after Medicare, right? And
right.
those are three programs where any state you go to are going to be cherished by the voters of that state.
That's right. That's right. And it's not from an entitlement standpoint. I know they're called entitlements, but this is also from a need perspective. These are programs that literally keep our citizenry alive. That
Yep.
and many of them are programs, are resources, are support that these folks worked towards getting, and many of them are entitled to. Right. I know in
Like Social Security.
exactly. Social Security is an entitlement, but it is also something
You pay into it.
you pay into it. You don't get Social Security, and it's really weird that it's not weird. It's just it's to your point about um the had people lining up in certain ways because you had one legislator in particular at the congressional level, uh, former Congressman Gary Graves, who one of the last acts of in Congress set it up so that teachers, for example, who do who are not who are not able to reap the benefits of Social Security, um, for a number of reasons, and been able to close that loophole so that they can actually pay into the system and actually get access to those resources when they go to retire. And now that was something that was celebrated with some fanfare as he was leaving office. And now we're talking about some of those same teachers not being able to take advantage of it because this program could go away much
Yep.
or be dramatically cut so that when it's their time, they actually won't be able to take advantage of it.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I know we got a few more minutes left with you, but we got to talk about insurance because we got to talk about insurance.
Let's get into it.
This session was there was a lot at risk here, right? And
Hmm.
what did you think about the fact that at the beginning of right before the session started, the Governor Landry, and Commissioner Tim Temple made what I want to characterize as bizarre, but you got to tell me what you thought about the fact that the two of them decided they were going to battle each other, and they were going to battle each other over who could outdo each other on auto insurance.
Yeah, it I guess in normal circumstances you could say it was bizarre, but for me it was somewhat expected.
Mm,
But it really got heated and contested, and unfortunately for me, I think the bills that were passed and signed into law won't really bring auto insurance rates down. So I think at the end of the day, we still failed the people. The legislature still failed the people. I was encouraged to see Senate President Cameron Henry mention, I believe it was last week, that he doesn't want to touch tort reform again for the next at least couple of years, because we need to see if what we do will actually lower rates.
right.
There was bills dealing with a presumption that if you didn't have any injuries, if you were healthy before you had an accident, and then you got into an accident, it was presumed that your injuries were a result of that accident. Your attorney still had to prove that those injuries were a result of that accident, but now that has gone away. So now you'll have to prove that you were healthy before your accident, and then you'll still have to prove that
You were
any injuries you sustained were a result of the accident, right?
oh,
Comparative fault. So now if a jury finds you to be more at fault for an accident, 50%, 51% or more, then you can't collect any damages. My issue with that is, how is a jury going to determine if you are at 49% at fault or 51% at fault?
right.
It's impossible, right? And so I thought that's something that's going to work against the people.
Yeah.
And so there's those type of laws that we pass dealing with auto insurance, I don't think are going to really make a difference in the rates that we pay when it comes to our renewal period for our auto insurance. The big bill, and I know you were watching this one, the
Mm,
big bill that was putting the governor and the insurance commissioner at odds is a bill that would enable the insurance commissioner to protect ratepayers from excessive premiums,
right.
right? And so the governor was pushing this bill to give the commissioner of insurance the authority to deny a rate filing from an insurance company if he thought the rate filing was excessive. Right now, the commissioner has the authority to do that if we don't have a competitive insurance market. So there needs to be an official designation saying that Louisiana's insurance marketplace is not competitive.
Right.
And if there is that designation, the commissioner can come in and say that this filing is excessive. You need to adjust it and make it more reasonable, right? Well, with the passage of this law, this new law, the insurance commissioner can say that this rate is excessive, whether we have a competitive market or not.
Right.
Now, I want to mention this. The commissioner of insurance believes that we have a competitive insurance marketplace. I know that because I directly asked him that question in House Insurance, right? I said, do you think we have a competitive auto insurance market? He said, yes. Do you think we have a competitive homeowners insurance market? He said, yes. Then my follow-up question to both of those was, last year you said the only way we can bring rates down is by increasing competition.
Right.
So why do we need to increase competition if you believe we already have a robust competitive marketplace, right? And so, I personally, Andronika, I don't think that the commissioner is going to use this new law to
Mm-hmm.
determine any rates to be excessive. But
Yep.
the thing to take away is that he now has the authority to do that.
Right. And that is something that in this model of government that we have, it is important that folks engage with this. The insurance commissioner's office, as you know, has a history of hosting events and talking to people, particularly during this time of the year. Right, hurricane season started a few weeks ago,
Yep.
and their outreach department will typically be on during their road shows, and we need the voters and the citizens to ask these questions and to demand better answers, and also to give you all the support you need next year, unless something happens and there's a special session this
No,
year.
don't say special session.
It's like
No,
it's like
they've already
Candyman. You say
talked
it three
about
times or something. So, but
it.
but either way, like, so again, we need voters to understand that this is the big takeaway from this session. It's not direct yet, but it
Correct.
also, but what you all are talking about, what happened in this bill, and you were right, we were paying very close attention to it, was especially the conversation around it, right? The that this I didn't see your exchange with him, but I heard about it, and it was just really interesting because, as you said, the commissioner has been saying since he was elected, he was also elected in 2023. That
With
was a
no
part
opposition.
with no opposition. That was a part of his conversation. Was he felt that the what we need is to attract. That's what we were talking about.
Yep.
That's what he and previous insurance commissioner Jim Donelon, because for everybody, for reference, this insurance crisis didn't start last year. It didn't start in 2023. The onset of it is about, we noticed something was happening in 2020, 2021.
2020, after the Lake Charles storms.
That's right. That's right. We started seeing the numbers go up, and the legislature attempted to do some things in 2023, things that we disagreed with. And I know you weren't fans of those, like the incentive package of giving money to the insurance companies.
Yep.
But that was the first thing we tried. We tried giving the insurance companies money because both insurance commissioners, Jim Donelon and Tim Temple, felt like the insurance companies needed to be wooed. They needed to be courted. They needed to feel, that was, to your point, they did not feel like the market was competitive, that there was enough interest in the market, and that's what was driving our prices. And so they started with these incentive programs, an incentive program that failed miserably after Katrina. They thought will work, in this new market. It didn't. And then that's when last year, why one of the few positives was your bill, which actually got revived at the last minute, right? It got brought back.
Yep.
They wanted tort reform last year, like a lot of tort reform and these restrictions, and that was a similar refrain, because that was the push. That's what they felt like the insurance companies needed. They need to feel safe. And we did things last year like kill the 3-year rule, right?
Yep.
And allow the insurance companies to raise rates multiple times a year without prior approval. And so it's just bizarre to hear the insurance commissioner say that he thinks that this market is competitive. And he has always said, he and his predecessor have maintained that a competitive market is what's necessary to lower prices. So if we have one, why are the prices still high?
Well, that is where I was going with my questioning to him. Apparently now we need tort reform. So some tort reform happened this session, and so I mean we'll look and see if rates go down over the next year or two. I suspect that they won't. And between the two of us, when you speak to the representatives for the insurance companies, they flat out are pretty straightforward and say there's not much y'all can do to lower the cost of insurance in the state of Louisiana. And so we're making these changes, which actually erode some of the rights of the citizens of Louisiana, in pitching it as a way to lower insurance rates. But I have little faith that the rates are actually going to go down because of these tort reform measures. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, if you're making people who are already vulnerable more vulnerable, right? If you're removing from them the lines of recourse, right? If something happens, if the worst should happen. And I want to, I've drilled down with a number of guests over the last few weeks and months about the tort reform argument. And I do want to talk it through with you because it's one of the things that it kind of is galling, and it I think it confuses people because frankly lawyers are an easy target, right? It's a simple argument, right? People are talking about, because yes, we do have a lot of personal injury lawyers, and um, we almost think of them as culture and people, right? Probably most people could name a personal injury lawyer that they right, if something happens.
Right.
I'm not gonna give them any free advertising time by repeating their jingles. But there are a lot of them, right? And so that truth doesn't have to be the issue, especially when I know we sent this to your office, and I think you saw it, the Weiss report that came out, that
Yep.
that devastating report that came out that showed that almost 45% of claims are denied.
Well, and that goes back to me what the crux of the issue is, right? They say the trial attorneys contribute to a culture of litigation. You get it hurt in an accident, you file suit. You have damage to your property from a storm or something, you file suit. But they ignore the fact that people are filing suit when they're either getting a runaround from their insurance company, they're being denied by their insurance company, or something else is happening.
Right.
So if the insurance companies are good actors and do what they're supposed to do, if I've been paying my premiums for several years and all of a sudden I get into an accident and I need to use my insurance to be made whole, the insurance company should do that. And
Right.
when they don't, we have no choice but to go to litigation and go through the courts.
Well, because
And
it's
so for me,
it,
that is the part that rarely comes up when they talk about tort reform being a panacea to high insurance rates.
right, because then it means that the insurance companies are going to be allowed to violate their end of the bargain, and there is no
Correct.
recourse.
Right. And just think about it. For us, it was Hurricane Ida, but even I think it was last year or the year before, we had Hurricane Francine, where people had damage to their properties,
Right.
right? And all they wanted was for their property to be repaired. How many people listening right now had an easy, pleasant conversation with their insurance company? They filed the claim, the company came out, and they looked at it and they said, okay, this looks legit. Here's your check to be made whole. It rarely happened, right?
Right.
And
That's right.
so people got the runaround. People had 10 adjusters come out to their property.
Right.
Every adjustment report was different, and then it goes to the desk adjuster who makes changes to the field adjuster's report. They delay the payment. If you recall, Andronika, after Ida, we ran into that issue where the companies were issuing jointly payable checks that was
Right.
to you and to your mortgage holder.
Right.
And so people couldn't even access that money. I actually passed legislation in 2022 to fix that issue so that that wouldn't happen moving forward. But there were just so many complications and
Right.
so many headaches that policyholders who had been paying their premiums ran into,
Right.
that a lot of them had to get an attorney to be made whole.
That's right.
That is the problem.
That's right. And again, that doesn't mean that it's because such a really problematic narrative, because I think one of the challenges, the thing that sticks in my craw with it is that it suggests that people are trying to get rich quick scheme, right? That and especially when you know what has to happen when you have to hire an attorney. Often you're doing so on a contingency basis. So whatever you get, you are going to have to pay up to a third of that, to up to 30% of that, to your attorney to cover their fees. So this is not a windfall for the homeowners. It's not a windfall for the insured. It's they're trying to be made whole, and that's why they are resorting to this, and saying they would prefer it if the insurance companies would just simply pay. And we've talked about it, and there was a bill that kind of introduced this in a way. The insurance commissioner's office actually has arbitration services that I'm still trying to figure out how you access them, right? Because
Yeah.
if if that could be a function of the Louisiana Department of Insurance, if you want to do tort reform And because one, again, part of that issue is if I need $60,000 to fix my house and my insurance company offers me 20, right? And I go to get a lawyer and they offer me 70,
Right.
we're going to take that, but I'm still going to be short.
Right.
Because
Which makes no sense because the insurance company would now be paying 20,000 more than you were actually looking for, and you'll still be short of the 50,000 that you need.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Exactly. So it's like it's like and again and so if you do something like binding arbitration, like there's arbitrator services managed by an entity like the Louisiana Department of Insurance that ostensibly should be looking to regulate as well as manage this industry on behalf of citizens, and that they would understand the information. They would understand, hey, the quotes, and be able to talk this through about what's happening. Because this doesn't often get to go to court or anything like that. It's usually
Right.
your lawyers
Settled
are
outside
writing
of court.
letters.
Right.
And and their lawyers. My favorite part about the tort reform argument from our friends in the insurance industry is, okay, so if the people can't have lawyers, you gonna get rid of yours?
Right. Right.
Are they gonna get rid of their lawyers who write their boilerplate language and all of the double speak and all of the stuff like that we're reading through our policy pages that we can't really understand? Are their
Right.
lawyers gonna go away? I don't think so.
No, you know they won't.
Yeah. So we're just to your point, and I love the way you said that we're restricting the rights of citizens, the right of redress, the right of recompense, the right to get somebody else to hold up their end of the deal. You
Yep.
signed a contract, and if you paid your premiums, and we all know too, especially with some of the things that they put in place, if folks don't pay their premiums, there is no recompense. Like, all you can do is to get your insurance put back in is give them their money.
Exactly.
And any penalties that they assess, and if you don't pay them and you lose your insurance, you're SOL. And we all kind of accept that piece of it. We've got to balance the playing field, and I think that's ultimately when we hear the insurance commissioner, when I hear the insurance commissioner say things like his opinions on whether or not the market is competitive or not, it speaks. Sometimes it says to me that what they're looking for is a market of marks.
Mm-hmm.
And that the insurance companies can just and again the risk piece, and so I also want us to talk about fortified roofs and short-term solutions that we need to talk about, because we actually do have a plan, right? It's not, we're actually not lost in the woods. We don't have to figure out how to turn multinational billion-dollar corporations into nice people. We can actually mitigate risk. And that's also something that happened in this session. We talked about that. There's some improvements made to the fortified roof program. Not enough, in my opinion. We can certainly do better, but and making sure that it works better. But we also have to address the climate change issues, not just around hurricanes, but also the things that we can do to make our communities more resilient. Right, the coastal restoration pieces. That's also a real big concern, and that was another piece that y'all fought off. The governor was trying to get more control over the New Orleans Levee Board, and y'all were like, nope.
Yeah, well, I was happy that we were able to drastically change that bill before it passed, because that was going to give him complete authority. On the fortified roof front, what we did a couple of good things, not enough, but one thing that we did was we passed a bill that would basically levy a fee on insurance companies, and that revenue would be dedicated toward the fortified roof grant program. So I think it's expected to generate maybe about $5 million a year, which is not enough, but it's $5 million more than we had as far as a dedicated source of revenue. So that was a good piece. We appropriated I want to say 10 or 15 more million dollars to the grant program. So we'll be able to do some more rounds of the Fortified Roof Grant Program lottery this year. There was a tax credit bill that I co-sponsored with Senate Chairman Kirk Talbot. Basically would allow you to claim a $10,000 tax credit for the purchase and installation of a fortified roof. So that is another good one. And then we made a change to an existing tax deduction to allow for fortified roofs and retrofits to fortified roofs. So I know a lot of people, especially in the city of New Orleans, need to put a new roof on their home in the next year or so. We still have a lot of, blue tarps on roofs. So,
Still do.
and I know a lot of people have really been trying to wait it out and hopefully get selected for the Fortified Roof Grant Program lottery. But these, if you have to go ahead and just get a new roof, hopefully this tax credit for the fortified roof would help with that. It does cost a little bit more as opposed to a regular traditional roof. I think it's maybe $4,000 to $5,000 more than a regular traditional roof on average. But the good thing is that you can, deduct that from your state income taxes. So hopefully, that provides some relief to people as well.
Yep.
So there was some positive fronts on that. And, I certainly thought that the bill Senator Duplessis had to provide a tax credit for, what I determined to be excessive premiums would have been, something really helpful in the city of New Orleans. But unfortunately, we couldn't get the votes to pass it off of the House floor.
Yeah.
And I know you were very closely involved in that as well.
But it was an interesting debate there too, because that one got really close. We had a lot of direct assistance bills get killed in committee, right? Rep Edmund Jordan's bill to stop the use of credit scores, because I think that's a lot. I think that a lot of people don't understand that bill died despite having the governor's support by one vote in committee.
Yep.
Also offered by Senator Duplessis, the bill to mandate discounts based on people getting fortified roofs while we work to get to the 25% tipping point of fortified roofs. Because at the current pace, we're not going to get there until 2062, and we need to move a little faster. And so you had a lot of votes. I had a lot of direct assistance initiatives just died in committee. This one got out of the Senate. Both sides out of committee, off the Senate floor, got out of the House committee by one vote. You were there for that exciting vote. And
I was working my butt off to get it out of committee. I was hopeful that we could get it off the House floor, and I'm sure you paid attention to that debate on the House floor.
Oh, yes.
They essentially used the logic that we were picking winners and losers because there was the income requirement for people to be able to claim that tax credit. And I made the argument that we do that all the time. There's really nothing that you can point to as far as an incentive goes or a tax credit or a tax deduction that is not targeted. It only applies to a certain population. It
Correct.
Could be industry-based. It could be geographically based. It could be income-based, right? Everything has a target audience. There's eligibility criteria. So I was very frustrated that was the argument they were using to vote against that bill.
Well, and also, too, it got down to it where you heard the arguments back and forth that one of the things that's just really disappointing about this argument, because you know people, this is the biggest issue facing folks, right? And want to thank you for your leadership and also helping us have this conversation where, we wanted to talk high level what happened, but we spent the last 30 minutes talking about this because this is the thing people care the most about.
Right.
And that a lot of your colleagues did get that. They absolutely did get that. You had a lot of Neil Reiser carried the bill on the floor and really pushed for it. Mike Baham out of Chalmette, saying he was really fighting for it. But one of the things that was even in that committee hearing where you heard people that winners and losers argument being articulated first. One of the things that's just so bizarre about it is that you had people kind of saying, well, no one wants that, like that they don't want to take something. They don't want to take this support, right? They don't want to take their government's help. And I think some of your colleagues just fundamentally misunderstand this, right? That they believe that if you're a homeowner, you should just be able to tough it out. But
Yeah,
that's not how it works.
one of my first chairmen in the legislature used to talk about how he was raised, and he said his dad always taught him that if he made $1, he saved 50 cents, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was just a practice that he adopted moving forward in life. And I always used to counter and say, well, what if you need the whole dollar to get through that day
Mm.
and you can't save anything? One piece of information that I've carried with me throughout my time in the legislature is the discretion that every member of the legislature is representing their district. Now, I may totally disagree with it. Everybody in the city of New Orleans may totally disagree with it,
Yep.
but I give them the respect that their district elected them, so they are trying to do what they think is in the best interest of their district. And I think sometimes they get, they get in their head that we have to kill this. This is not good policy, whatever. This is a handout to poor people, which they hate to do, right? But they get it in their head, and they're like, I have to come up with some argument to argue against this proposal. And I think that's exactly what happened with Senator Duplessis's bill. They really couldn't think of a good reason to argue against it, and so they came up with, this is picking winners and losers, and the legislature should not do that, at least in this instance.
Right. Exactly. In this one instance, even the bill that you and Senator Talbot did for the tax credits to put the fortified roof on, that's a winner or loser. That's somebody who's got
Exactly.
$18,000 lying around that they could
Exactly.
front, and
You
then
have to be able to buy a fortified roof and put it on your home. Exactly.
with no help, and then you're going to get almost half of a little more than half of the money back. I mean,
Every incentive, every credit, every exemption, every deduction is applicable to only a certain group of people
that's
or
right.
businesses. Everyone.
And that's why what we are trying to do here, and what you all tried to do here in this last session, was stack the deck for the folks who need the most help, and also, like, again, distribute it so we could have a good system. I mean, I think that's part of the part that people are missing, is that the folks, these bills that you and the things that you have championed would help is, one, for a larger group of people, and two,
Yep.
they're the most vulnerable, and if we lose them, there's someone's mother, that's someone's family member, that's that voter, that's your constituent you're talking about here, and you're saying that we've got to wait until a strategy that, again, our insurance commissioner seems to be, he is not interested in making any big changes. So what else can be done?
Yeah. And look, the situation is very serious. We've been losing population since the storms in 2020.
Yep. That's right.
Every year we've been losing population, and I think a big part of that reason, especially in the coastal areas, the coastal parishes, is because homeowners insurance is just unaffordable.
That's right.
And what
That's
happens when you have that dollar in your pocket, but you need that whole dollar to pay your property tax that at that time, right?
That's right.
But you also have to pay your escrow payment, and you just don't have the money to do it.
That's right.
People are selling their homes and packing up and leaving. And in many cases, they're leaving the state altogether. They're not moving to the North Shore or to St. Bernard Parish. A lot of times people are picking up and moving the state, leaving the state. And it is a serious crisis. It's been a crisis since 2021. And I still think that, as we leave the session, which adjourned last Thursday, we still have not done enough to properly address the homeowners insurance crisis in the state of Louisiana.
Yeah. So, and That's the issue, and I'm glad you put in that stark relief and be really clear about it. And I also want to make sure that folks who are listening understand that we're also talking about renters, right? Like it's the homeowners are going to be the ones directly paying the bills, but landlords
It gets passed along.
this is driving. This is the single issue. We've been monitoring this. We're seeing triple digit monthly increases year after year after year. $100 per month increase for the last 3 years in a row.
Wow.
People can't take that. At least $100 increase per month.
Wow.
Every year, after year, after year. People can't take that. And so folks who are hanging on by their fingertips are falling through the cracks. To your point, they're doubling up but they're also leaving the state. They're leaving the state. They're leaving and we're losing who we are. And I'm glad that you're in the legislature, that you guys have some partners up there, but we've got to get you some more support because we can't do another session like this. Next year, we've got to come home with some real transformative change. And we've also got to see changes happen at the local level as well.
I definitely agree with you, Andronika.
All right.
Well, look, thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Of course, we're going to have you back. We're going to have you back to dig down some more on this. So
sounds good.
Take care, Rep. Willard.
All right. Thank you. You too.
This was a great show. As promised, we did our full debrief on the legislative session. There's still more to discuss. There's still more to do. There's still more work to be done. But we do have leaders. We do have opportunities, and you do have your voices. Don't forget that. Don't be discouraged. Be mad, but do not be discouraged because there is a path forward. And it's what we talk about every week. It's putting people first and put housing first. I'll be back next week. We're likely going to be tape delayed next week, so we won't be live. But I'll be back next week, as we are every week, to talk with you on WBOK 1230 AM New Orleans. Y'all take care of each other out there.